was living at the suburbs when a terrible hailstorm rained. It was far more brutal than any other, turning off the power almost 15 minutes after it hit and leaving me in the darkness. I remember I badly wished I was in my bed, but I couldn't go there. You see, I had been making myself lunch at the time, and I had just placed my bacon on the fryer when the storm hit. And so there I was standing in the darkness and trying to cut ham without chopping off my limbs, when suddenly my door slammed open. The cold wind poured in so strongly it tossed my pictures to the floor. And at the door there stood my neighbor. She came in and told me that she'd been calling me for minutes now, but I guess I couldn't hear her because of the storm. Then she told me about my car. Before she even finished, I knew what she was talking about. I'd forgotten my car outside of the garage. Maybe I didn't forget it. I always left it there. But the thing is, I didn't know that there would be a hailstorm now. I went to get dressed, and when I was done, I headed out. It was raining so hard that my car was only a black shape in the distance, and the hail was pouring down rather hard. I only made it about 3 steps before I tripped on something, and we decided it would be best I wait the rain out. So I had to watch my car being pelted for 10 more minutes. When it was done, I got to the walkway and walked around the lawn this time. I didn't notice something that I should have paid closer attention to, and that is, the gates were wide open. I didn't pay attention to that though, because I was more concerned about my car. But then I looked down, and undoubtedly I could make out mud stains in the shape of footprints leading to the back door of my car. By then, I realized that something terrible must have been happening. I walked to my car, but kept my distance. I stayed a few meters away and walked around the car, peering through the shattered windows from the distance. That really hurt to look at, but by then, my fear was already blocking out everything else. I walked around the car a bit longer, but I didn't see anybody inside. Feeling relieved, I walked to the car. I opened the front seat and started scooping out ice cube from the floor. But then I heard a, "Hey, there are glasses in there." When I turned around, there was a man sitting there with a bald head, but a very bushy face and with a massive grin splitting it. I held back my scream, but I couldn't stop myself from running the hell out of there. When I was on the lawn and he started skipping to the gates. Then he was gone. The Asker. I was walking home from school at that time, and it started raining. I didn't think it was that bad, so I started running. And there is this little shed by the road on my way home, where we used to play, but I don't play there anymore, because my mother says there's spirits there. Anyway, I was running past this shed when something else happened. A rock hit my elbow. I stopped and looked around to who threw it, but then another one hit me on my back, then on my shoulder. Soon, I could feel the rocks pelting my entire body, and only then did I figure it out that it wasn't just rain now, it was also hail that was falling. Now, think about it. What would you have done in that case? Run back home the rest of the way, even with the rain pelting your body? Or would you just run to the shed? Well, I took the obvious smart route. I ran up the hill and ducked under the shed. Immediately my body thanked me for it. There were painful sores on my arms and quads, but other than that, I was alright. And then I felt something terrible. There was water dripping down my back. I quickly took it off and placed it on the floor. Then I opened it and pulled out the books, and to my worst horror, they were all dripping wet. Even the books of the scariest teacher in our school. I was looking for my pencil case when I heard a blood-curdling scream. I don't want to say scream because that would make you think of a human. What I heard sounded like something like some animal, and it was a dying one at that. So my head snapped around, and right over there I saw a woman sitting at the edge of the shed. Her hair was pitch black and hung over her face as if she just rolled out of bed, and her skin was white as paper. I was too busy trying to process what was happening when I heard a rumbling coming from the other side of the shed. I took that moment to scoop my bag and books and run the hell out of there. I don't remember what, but there were a few things I left behind. But I was very grateful I did, because when I got to the bottom of the hill, I turned and I looked at the hill. There were 3 burly men standing there, wearing no shirts, but wearing gloves. They looked down at me angrily, and I don't know why they didn't chase me, but they didn't, and so because of that, I managed to flee that place, and I've never gone there since. The tracker. Yes, this reminds me of one time when I was still interning. I'm not trying to tell you a soapy story, but I didn't have much money back in those days, and as a result, I really couldn't afford the paid parking that they gave us at work. So what I'd normally do is I'd park my car a long distance away from work, and I'd have to walk all the way to my job. And I had to do that even when it was raining. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into the story. So I was walking up that hill that day. In fact, I was running up that hill because the rain that was falling had turned hard and it was literally painful. So there I am, running up the hill, and as I am running, I suddenly start seeing mud coming down the sidewalk. To my left, there was a lawn, and the sidewalk was pure stone. So I was somewhat surprised to see mud being washed to my feet, but I decided to head on. However, I had to stop because I started seeing the strangest sight. Up in front of me, there was a guy standing there, dressed in black. He had his side to me, and he looked like he was thinking, since his eyes were to the floor. Now, I couldn't understand what was happening, since there was literally no one else outside but me and him, so I asked the guy if there was a problem. At the sound of my voice, his head slowly rose, and it was at that moment I realized I'd made a mistake. He then turned around to face me, and I saw what was in his other hand. He was holding a crowbar that was dripping red water. And I looked at the mud at my feet again. That wasn't mud. It was not mud. I heard screaming, and I saw the man running down towards me and lifting the crowbar into the air. I had to turn and run the hell out of there. As I was running, I saw there was a girl from the office stepping out of her car. I told her to get in, and she smiled, thinking I was joking. But then her face turned sour when she saw what was behind me. She got into her car and told me to hurry, and when I jumped in the back, she drove us off. She called the boss and explained why we were late, and then we called the cops. That was the most intense thing that ever happened to me in my whole life. The breaker. So Ab and I were coming from a family get-together, and honestly, I was not doing good at all at that point. Ab's family aren't the kindest people in the world, and they seemed to relish in antagonizing me, so that had been a disaster. And as if Zeus wasn't done with me, on my way home a massive storm hit us. Then it started raining hail. The hail blocks were massive, I'm telling you, thick as basketballs, and I was sure one of them would break into the window and kill me. At least then, I'd never have to deal with Ab's family again. Anyway, she was talking my ear off about when I said this and when I said that, and asking me to go faster. Just when I was starting to pray one of the things break our window and kill us already, the car suddenly bumped over something, sending us into the air. I drove for a while, feeling completely shocked, and I looked to the mirror, and there I saw it. There was something wrapped in a coat on the road, a distance behind us. I saw it immediately, when I looked, but I still didn't stop. I just couldn't. My shock was too much. Finally, Eb screamed that I should stop, and I slammed the brakes. I don't know how long we sat there in complete silence as the hail dented my bonnet. Then finally, Eb asked if that was a man, and I honestly couldn't answer. But then, something felt off. Why didn't I even see him? I was scared of going to jail, yes, but I just couldn't stop thinking of how I literally didn't see him. Eb asked I go back, and I told her to wait, and she yelled again, telling me I could still save him, and I told her to shut up. A bit rough, I know, but that's when I finally saw it. There was an antler sticking out of the man's head. That was not a man. That was a deer covered in a jacket, which meant... And just then, people jumped out of the bushes a distance behind us. I floored the gas and we were speeding off. The people gave chase, but it was too late. We were gone. By then, Eb was telling me to drive. When we were far, she couldn't stop talking about how amazing I am and wondering how I figured out it was a trap. And that's what worries me the most. I didn't. The Taunter. Alright, so this happened while we were out on our family camp. It was the last day and we were packing up to leave. Austin went to pee in the woods and he stayed there a bit longer than was necessary, so my mother asked I go look for him. So I went to the forest to look for the idiot, and I was walking around the trees, peering and stuff, when I heard a sharp noise. It was whimpering. At that point, I started to get concerned, and I looked around more frantically. The more I listened to it, the closer I got to it, the more I realized it didn't sound human at all. It sounded like a puppy. In fact, I got so close to it that I could tell it was coming directly from the bush in front of my face. But something told me to not open the bush, so I took a few steps back and climbed up the hill to the side as fast as I could. When I got to the top, I could look over the edge, and there he was. A naked man holding a ball of hail in his hand. He was looking directly at the bush I was standing in a minute ago, and he couldn't see that I was now above him. I called down at him, and he turned his face to me, showing his yellow crooked teeth and his mad eyes. I gave him a massive FU, and I ran just as he screeched and chased me. By the time I got back to the camp, Austin was already there, and I told them what had happened. And my father told one of the workers there. The worker said he'd do something about him, and he spoke of him as if he already knew the guy. The Preparer. Alright, it was raining cats and dogs, and I was sitting on the couch, basically relaxing. Rain helps me sleep better, even if it is a gigantic storm. But then, as I was sleeping, I heard what sounded like, well, footsteps from the top floor. Honestly, it's because I have the benefit of hindsight now, so the story will be butchered a bit. But at that time, I didn't know that it was footsteps. At that time, I just assumed it was rain. So I remained sitting for a while, and I was preparing to fall asleep after one more match on Candy Crush. But my battery beeped. I like to sleep with my phone in the charger, so that when I wake up, it is ready for me. So I went to my room to place my phone in the charger, but as I was walking in the hallway, I heard what sounded like footsteps up the stairs. This time, I actually saw it, a shadow of a man across the hallway. At that point, I was next to the cabinet, so I opened it and I quickly jumped in. My parents were both at work, so I knew whoever was out there was definitely not them. But who were they? I had no idea. The person walked past me while I was on the cabinet and then messed around in my house before he left for good. When I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore, I stepped out of the cabinet. I told my parents what happened, and they both hurried home. But as we looked around the house, we found that there was literally nothing taken. And that's what makes it creepier. The guy hadn't come here for any of the things. He'd come here for me. And I don't know what he was going to do. The Hera. Okay, so one morning I was walking, doing my hair for school, when I heard a loud crushing sound from downstairs. The sound sounded like somebody dropped an elephant, and then it was followed by a sharp scream from my father. I hurried out of my room and saw my mother was already there, and my little sister. We went downstairs to see my father, holding his bloody nose, and behind him, there was my little cousin. My little cousin is an innocent-looking boy with a playful grin, and he loves wearing colorful clothes. But honestly, I'd grown to discover the boy was a little more than just that. He told us that he had placed the hail there as a surprise, but then it must have melted, and so my father got hurt. We forgave him for it. After all, he was just a kid, and that was our mistake. My little cousin had started living with us for a while, and from school, we started hearing reports. Some of the kids claimed that he cut them with scissors in class, and I couldn't help thinking that was the craziest thing I'd heard in my entire life. My little cousin was just a playful boy who could never do any harm. This opinion changed when I found frogs in his shoes. I went to tell him about it, and he vehemently denied it, saying that my little sister just hated him, and that's why she lied to him. But then I told him that in fact, I saw the frogs, which were cut into pieces, with my own eyes. And it was at that moment, the playful grin on his face immediately dropped, and he said, "So you've just been playing with me?" I was shocked by this turn, and I asked him what he meant, and he said I knew all along. His voice was just flat, and his face was plastic. That was when I realized that the kid, he is absolutely something special. The Pouncer. After a heavy hailstorm one time, I went out of my home to sweep the driveway for Dad. It is easier to sweep away the hail while it is still icy. If you wait for it to melt, then the cars will start sliding, and so the minute the storm stopped, I grabbed the broom and ran outside. I got outside, and I saw something that made my heart pause. On our driveway, right on the hail, there was a man sleeping there, dressed in a shaggy wet coat. I walked over to him and tried to shake him awake, but he wouldn't wake up, and so I ran inside. I'd been intending on boiling warm water for him, making tea or something, but then as I was boiling the water, I went to the window to see if he was still awake, and the sight made me freeze. The man was clearly awake, but he was looking at our door with an irritated look. That's when I realized he must have been pretending to be sleeping. But why? Well, I had no idea. Now, I couldn't wait for the hail to melt, so I had to go out quickly and start sweeping, but I didn't know what to make of the man. The floor leading to our door is made of wood, so it was unavoidable that he'd hear me when I was walking out, and when I appeared, I saw him sleeping as if he hadn't woken. I walked over and started sweeping around him. After he realized I wasn't waking him up, he started to groan. I asked him to please leave, and immediately the groan stopped. When I turned to look at him, he had his eyes directly on me. No pretense anymore. He pounced and ran over to me. I swung the broom at his face, and although it hit him, he didn't react at all. So I ran out of there and slipped to fall on my knees, but I got up and went into my home, locking the door behind me. The man slammed his shoulder onto the door, but luckily that was his last push. and it was quiet.